Hello and welcome to Aero Innovations. I'm Aero and I'll be your host this evening. If you're new to the channel, I'm a poker coach and a longtime poker pro. I specialize in low stakes, no limit hold'em. I've been playing professionally here in Las Vegas for over 9 years now. I also play fairly regularly on a live stream called The Absolute Nuts, which broadcasts from the Resorts World Friday and Saturday nights between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Here, you can see me play regularly against players like Frankie C and Michael Mizrachi, as well as other known celebrities and poker legends. If you haven't seen their channel, you should really check them out. They host the craziest 5-5 private game in all of Las Vegas. Oh, by the way, David, one of the owners of the channel, has offered a special invite to viewers of my vlog. Normally, it could take months to get into one of their games, but if you're a fan of my vlog and your travels bring you through Las Vegas, message me on Instagram if you want to get a seat on the live stream. I can most likely finagle you into the game. Anyways, tonight, let's review a couple of very short but super profitable sessions I played. The first one takes place this last Friday night. I had just finished a 6-hour session on livestream with the Absolute Nuts crew, but I was still wired with adrenaline from a $2,500 win, so I head over to my usual haunt at the Wynn Encore to play some 2-5, where I buy in for $1,500, which is 300 big blinds. It's Friday night on January 11th, although technically Saturday morning. Less than 15 minutes into the session, Under the Gun limps with an $1,800 stack. I raise to 20 in the middle position with pocket nines. The cutoff and button both call. The Under the Gun player, an older gentleman, suddenly limp raises to 80. Limp raise under the gun? Really? Like, when is that not aces or kings, right? We're more than deep enough to set mine, so I make a pretty standard call. Suddenly, the cutoff goes from calling my $20 raise to shoving for his entire stack of $1,000. Obviously, the button folds. While the Under the Gun player is contemplating what to do, I think about my options as well. Certainly, if the Under the Gun player calls or shoves, I'm snap folding. There's nothing to think about. That's an obvious monster. However, if he folds, I think I'm calling here. I can't imagine what sort of hand just calls my $20 raise, but now suddenly decides he has an all-in hand. If he was trapping with a real hand, like some players might rarely do, I think he would 4-bet here. I think an all-in shove means he wants to capitalize on fold equity. The more I think about it, the more positive I'm definitely calling if the Under the Gun player folds. Unfortunately, I never get that opportunity. The Under the Gun player reshoves for his entire stack that covers me, which I thought there was a good possibility he was going to do. So of course, I can only fold. Here, you can listen to some of the original audio.
$1,500. I'm all in.
Oh my gosh, I was gonna call too. Oh my gosh. I have a really big hand, but alright.
So the board runs out, and it's 3-5 king on a rainbow flop. Another 3 comes on the turn, and another 3 comes on the river. The cutoff shows ace queen of hearts, and the Under the Gun player reveals pocket aces, which was quite obvious. We had both players pegged with roughly the sorts of hands we thought they had, but it didn't matter because we still had to fold. About 20 minutes later, Under the Gun limps. I raise to 25 on the button with ace-king offsuit. Small blind calls. The big blind suddenly 3-bets to 135 with a 1K stack. He's the same opponent from the last hand who shipped his stack with ace-queen of hearts. The Under the Gun limper folds. Our opponent might think I'm just raising in position. There's a large number of hands that I dominate, such as ace-queen, ace-jack suited, king-queen suited, etc. There's also a large number of hands I can get to fold without having to see a flop. We're talking about hands like 9s or 10s if I play my hand aggressively. These hands are mathematically ahead of me. Statistically, I'm only going to hit 1 out of 3 flops, so ace-king actually plays much better as an aggressive 4-bet in position as opposed to meekly just calling a 3-bet and hoping to smash a flop. So that's what I opt to do and put in a large bet to 420. For this price point, my opponent is incentivized to either 5-bet rip it or fold. I don't want to choose a smaller amount like 320 or so, whiff a flop, and then be put into a really uncomfortable position considering our opponent's more shallow stack depth. So that's why I chose a price point where he'll either rip it or fold. So here, small blind quickly folds, but not too surprisingly, the big blind snap folds as well. I guess he really was 3-betting pretty light. A full hour later, our old table has broken, So we've been moved to a new table that's currently 7-handed. Here, under the gun straddles, the cutoff limps. I have a hand that could raise in position, but since we're out of position, I just call in the small blind. Suddenly, the big blind raises to 50 with a full $1,500 stack. The straddle folds, but the cutoff calls with an $1,800 stack. So I make the call with 7-9 of spades. The flop comes Jack, 8, Queen, with 2 hearts and 1 spade. We flop a gut shot that we won't be too proud of if it hits, considering Ace King will make Broadway. So I check with full intentions of folding to almost any bet. Thankfully, both opponents check as well. The turn brings in a 6 of diamonds, which is a really nice card. We're now open-ended against 2 opponents whom haven't shown too much interest in the pot. Let's see if they don't mind folding to my 9 high by placing out a bet of 115. To my shock and horror, they both make the call. What the heck is going on here? How does a 6 give you guys any confidence as to the strength of your hand? So the river comes, and it's a deuce of hearts, completing the front door flush. We brick out. We're literally sitting here with 9 high. I weigh my options. I'm not too concerned about the big blind original raiser, since he would have most likely led with a flush draw on the flop, but the cutoff is a more conservative player. I've only seen him play a few hands, but they were definitely played on the meeker side, such as checking King Queen on a king high board after his opponent bet the flop but checked the turn. Still, if he's the only player I have to worry about, then I can go with pure mathematics here. I only need to be right about my opponents here 1 in 3 times for this play to be profitable. If neither of them rivered the flush, I should be able to get away with a steal here with very high confidence. While thinking about what to do, I noticed the cutoff player double check his cards after seeing the river. Surely, if he were on a flush draw, he would remember that.
Gotcha, bitch!
So that settles any unease I had. I lead the river with a hefty bet of $400 into the pot of 505. Thankfully, both opponents quickly fold, so I take down this sizable pot with 9 high. Again, it's another hour and a half before I play my next notable hand. I've been getting a whole lot of squadouche, so I've just been folding a lot to maintain my small win. In poker, you need to learn patience. There are different styles on how to be profitable, just like there are many different styles of martial arts. They all work to obliterate the average Joe. Personally, I try to win a few big pots a night, and I don't fight for the small pots, which is a very contrasting viewpoint to a professional like Mark Goon, for instance. Here, my old table has broken, so here I'm on a new 7-handed table yet again. Under the gun opens to 15. The hijack 3 bets to 60 with a stack of about 2,700, which is absolutely massive and terrifying. I say it's terrifying because I'm sitting here with Ace King offsuit on the button. Normally, this is just a slam dunk 4-bet. However, you have to vary your play depending upon your opponent. You know how Doug Polk says to never fold pocket kings pre-flop? And then he gets into a situation where he 4-bets with kings, Alex 5-bets with queens, and Andrew Nemi 6-bets with aces. Well, guess what? Doug, the guy who says never fold kings pre-flop, folds his kings. He knows that Andrew Nemi is super tight and not the type of player to 6-bet with anything other than exactly pocket aces. So even though I 4-bet with ace king on the button over 95% of the time, this is one of those times where I'm going to have to deviate. This particular opponent just played a hand about 5 minutes ago where another player 3-bet him to the tune of 100 and some change, and then he just 4-bet ripped it for his entire massive stack of well over 2,500. I do not want to face a similar situation because I'm totally folding to that sort of aggression with ace king. I mean, I'm not Brad Owen. I don't want to call a 5-bet shove with ace king for over 300 big blinds, only to have Phil Ivey show me he has aces. So here I deviate from my standard play and just call the $60 3-bet. The blinds fold, but the under the gun makes the call. The flop comes, and it's a beauty. It's ace 10-8 with 2 diamonds and 1 heart. We flop top pair with top kicker. It gets even better when both opponents check to us. So in this particular situation, in a 3-bet pot, we don't need to go ballistic here. That's going to fold out all the hands that we have absolutely crushed, like jacks through kings. We don't necessarily have to set a bad price for a flush draw either, because in a 3-bet pot, our opponents won't necessarily be calling with those types of hands. Sure, someone can have a hand like Jack Queen or Jack King of Diamonds, but against that sort of hand, I can still start with a smaller than normal flop bet, and then tune up the aggression on the turn, depending upon if it's the under the gun original raiser that calls me, or the hijack 3-better. For this hand, I prefer to make a bet as if I'm only betting due to position, so I slide out a single black chip for a $100 bet into the pot of 185. Plus, with a bet sizing of this magnitude, I can still fold if I face a hefty check raise. And yes, I do intend to fully fold to a check raise here, even after flopping top. An opponent who check raises me here will most likely have a hand like a set of 10s, ace 10 suited, or even pocket aces if it's the original 3-better. Thankfully, that doesn't happen. The under the gun player folds, and the hijack just calls. The turn brings in a 3 of spades, which I'm really happy to see. Our opponent checks. Okay, this is where, once again, I'm going to deviate from the standard play. This is what makes my playstyle a highly exploitative playstyle as opposed to GTO. I'm putting my opponent on a very strong pocket pair like kings or queens, that unfortunately for him, we have absolutely crushed on an ace-high board. We don't necessarily have to protect our equity here. Yes, I realize there are 2 Broadway cards on board, as well as a flush draw, but keep in mind, I have an extremely good knack of putting my opponents on exact hands. Don't try to imitate what I do until you, too, build up a good enough spidey sense to properly ascertain your opponent's hands. There's no way I can get 3 streets of value from an underpair to an ace, so I'm going to go for 2 streets of value with this hand. I check back the turn. The river brings in a 5 of diamonds, completing the front door flush. Suddenly, our opponent comes out betting, throwing 2 black chips into the middle. I snap call. Sure, he can have a flush here some of the time, but even if he does, we made the call cheaper for ourselves by not betting the turn. But no, our opponent did not have a flush. He flips over pocket freaking kings. The cursed Cowboys, and we show him the winner. Oh man, I was right on so many levels here. If I had 4-bet pre-flop, as I would do almost every single time here, our opponent would most likely 5-bet rip his entire stack like he did only just 5 minutes earlier before the start of this hand. Facing that sort of aggression, I would be forced to fold. I mean, I'm not about to stick in my entire stack for a quote-unquote flip scenario in the best case where we're actually a 10% underdog if our opponent had a hand like pocket queens. I actually don't understand that strategy at all. If you watch the vlog, you would know that I almost always avoid flip scenarios if possible. In this case, it would not have been a flip at all. I would have been a 30-70 underdog. Yes, I would have won in the end, and I would have won massive, but that's not the point. That's being too results oriented. I much preferred that I played this hand correctly, as opposed to playing it poorly and just getting lucky. I don't even get a break to fully stack my chips when in the very next hand, the hijack opens to 15, the low jack calls, and I'm sitting here staring at pocket jacks in the cutoff. Pocket freaking jacks. These guys have not been very good to me this past year. I'm not too partial to them. However, I still need to play them correctly, so I put in a pretty solid 3-bet to 75. Suddenly, to my horror, the button puts in a cold 4-bet to 210 with a full stack of $1,500. I really hate getting into a big pot immediately after winning a decent sized pot. Oftentimes, I'll make a really bad decision because I'm still riding the adrenaline high from the last hand. So here, I take a moment to properly assess my situation. It's 135 more for me to call. Our opponent started with a $1,500 stack, which is more than the 10-to-1 price point I need to set mine, for 135 more. I'm not loving it, but I think I have to call here. It's gonna suck when I miss the flop and have to give back half of what I just won in the last hand though. Logically, calling is the right move, so that's what I do. Truth be told, if my opponent had chosen a larger price point, like $275 for instance, I would have just folded. So the dealer starts setting out the flop, and you know how there's always one card on top of the other two before the card spreads out? Well, in this case, that card happens to be a freaking jack of diamonds. Let's go! Hells yeah! In my head, I'm sitting here hip thrusting like the guy from Despicable Me. Oh yeah! Oh yeah! So the next 2 cards roll out, and along with the jack of diamonds is accompanied an 8 of hearts as well as a 9 of hearts, putting 2 hearts on board. I start with a check. My opponent down bets to 150. I pretend like I've never seen a down bet before, and I ask my opponent, why go from 210 to 150? Your bet just got smaller. I contemplate my options. I don't like that this board is so coordinated. If our opponent truly has an overpair here, we want to get it in right here and now. We don't want a 10, a queen, or another heart to kill the action. With this in mind, I cut out a min raise and slide in 300. I tell our opponent that ace-king is no good, as if we're just putting out a feeler bet. To prove me wrong, he goes all in, and of course I snap call. I declare that I have a set. Our opponent says he also has a set, which is even better for us than him having an overpair. This reduces his odds of winning from 2 down to 1, which is pretty darn great. Hearing that he has a set, I just flip over our hand, knowing that our opponent is most likely drawing extremely thin. He says that he has a set of 9s. The turn brings in a 3 of diamonds, and the river brings in a king of hearts. So we scoop a massive pot immediately after winning a decent sized one. Okay, so our opponent waking up with pocket 9s there was definitely not what I thought he had at all, and definitely not a style of play I would advocate. We were closer to the bottom of our range in terms of pocket pairs for our 3-bet amount. If I had a bigger pair there, like kings or aces, since we're out of position, I would have 5-bet to like 550 or 600, making it so our opponent might never see the set that he would have flopped. Instead of seeing a flop for 75 and getting a great price point to set mine, he would have priced himself out of that opportunity. So yeah, definitely not a fan of that play at all. At this point, I'd already been playing close to 3.5 hours, and as you know, I'd already been playing on stream for over 6 hours prior to that, so it's high time I called it quits and cashed out. I do play another orbit or so as to not seem rude with a hit and run. The player I had stacked flew in with another friend named Sunny, who's a fellow professional poker player. I think they said they were both visiting from Florida. We had been playing on the same table for a few hours, so I caught up with Sunny for a quick interview. Hey, so this is Aero. What's your name?
Sunny.
Sunny, you played with me tonight. You are a professional poker player, right?
Yes.
How much do you win an hour normally?
$80 an hour.
And you played with me tonight and I show you my statistics. Do you think they're real or am I making it up or what do you think? What are your thoughts?
They're real.
So you think that I really actually make 30 big blinds an hour, 150 an hour? You think that's real?
I think that's real. Yeah.
What did you think of my play tonight?
I think it was great, man.
All right.
Well.
All right, thanks. Nice meeting you, Zai. Nice meeting you. In for 1,500 and out for 40.83 for an amazing profit of 25.83 after only 3 hours and 31 minutes of playtime, slightly surpassing how much I'd won earlier that night on the Absolute Nuts livestream, and giving us a combined profit of just over $5,000 after a single night of work. Oh, by the way, if you aren't aware, I'm currently on a quest this year to make 100k playing only 2-5 and occasionally 5-5 no limit hold'em. My personal guess is that I should have this challenge completed by late October. What makes my challenge difficult? Plenty of 2-5 pros can make 100k in a year if they put in enough hours, right? Well, the biggest difference between me and other 2-5 pros is that I only average between 15 to 20 hours of poker a week. That's barely considered part-time. Well then, how do I expect to complete such a ridiculous challenge? My secret weapon is that I have an extremely high hourly rate for the low stakes. But hey, you never know. Maybe this year is the year that I go broke, and then I just nuke my channel out of shame. Shame. But hey, since we're doing an intermission, if you guys don't mind, smash that like button for me, please. It will only take you a quick second. Just smash it like you would a juicy booty. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel if crushing low stakes, no limit hold'em is something you're interested in learning. Watching my vlogs is like free education and entertainment, considering I normally charge $150 an hour for coaching. In terms of the 100k challenge, due to the way my vlog editing is set up, this vlog will actually release after my January 12th session. So if you watched the last video, you already know how I'm doing. But if you haven't, go check it out. Okay, since I didn't have very many hands this session to go over, let's revisit another session I played back on November 30th. I'm gonna do my best this year to keep you guys up to date on every session I play in 2025. Meanwhile, still wrapping up my backlog of sessions from late 2024, whenever I get a chance to squeeze one of those sessions in. Okay, so back at the end of November, it was a Friday night, not unlike the session we just went over. Back then, just like now, I had just finished a profitable session playing on the live stream with the crew from the Absolute Nuts, squeezing out a nearly $1,600 win after 4.5 hours. As per normal, I was still wired with adrenaline, so I head over to the Wynn Encore to play some 2-5 no limit hold'em where I bind for 1,500, which is 300 big blinds. We start at 1:58 in the morning. Okay, so for the first hour, I'm actually down a couple $100. Not really getting anything, just bleeding in small pots here and there. Then at 3:08 in the morning, I finally get a decent hand to play. There's a live 10. I open to 40 in the cutoff with pocket 10s. The big blind and straddle both call, so go 3 ways to a flop, which comes 7, king, jack, rainbow. The action checks to me. I have like third pair for crying out loud. If I had an ace high type of hand with like ace queen or ace 10, I'd probably just bet here since this board is pretty decent for my range. Plus, with those sorts of hands, even if I get called, I'd at least have 4 clean outs to smash the absolute nuts and 3 potential outs to hit an ace, assuming it's any good. With pocket 10s, however, I think it's a pretty clear check. I have showdown value, meanwhile holding a hand that needs a miracle even against a naked jack. So yeah, I just check the action back. The turn comes, and it brings in a 9 of clubs, putting 2 clubs on board. We improve to a very sneaky double gut shot draw. Suddenly, big blind comes out leading for 75, which is not an extremely large bet considering the pot of 120. The straddle calls. We're getting a great price, and we also have position, so I make the call. The river comes, and it's an ace of clubs. Not only does our hand not improve, but this ace adds an additional overcard to the board, and also completes the backdoor flush. This is pretty disastrous, right? When both players check the action over to me, I should just check here, right? I mean, I do have pocket 10s. Maybe I might actually be good here. Heh, no, I don't think so. There's almost no chance I'm any good here. The pot is 345, but that's only because 3 people have put money into it. Individually, each of us is only committed for 115. That's like hardly anything at all. If one of our opponents hit this backdoor flush, I think they would have bet their own hand. Plus, that ace is also an additional scare card versus a single pair. Would you call a big bet here if you were holding a naked king? I know I certainly wouldn't. See, this is the power of position, and we're not talking about missionary. Position is massive, very much like a black man's Johnsonville sausage. Noting the weakness from both of my opponents, I shoot out a toe-curling overbet to the tune of 425. Both of our opponents fold, so we steal this pot with 4th pair and crawl out of the hole, treading water with a very smug $30 net profit for the session. Oh yeah! Less than 10 minutes later, I get dealt another playable hand. Here I open to 20 in the cutoff with ace-queen offsuit. The small blind and big blind both call. We go 3 ways in position to a flop of jack, 8, 10, with 2 clubs and 1 spade. We flop an open-ended draw with 2 overcards, and what's more, one of our straight outs will give us a very sneaky nut straight. Here, small blind leads with an overbet of 80 into the $60 pot with just over a 1K stack. Big blind calls with a full stack of 1,500. Wow, this is pretty ideal. I don't mind the overbet at all, especially since we have an additional player trapped in the middle to improve our odds. Okay, strategy time. What might normally be 8 outs for the straight, with an additional 6 outs to hit one of our overcards, for a combined total of 14 outs, which is absolutely massive. Instead, we have to whittle down these outs pretty considerably. First off, the straddle might be on a flush draw. That means we have to remove all of the club cards from our potential outs. Secondly, one of our opponents might be holding a 9 for the obvious open-ended draw. This means we also have to remove the queen from our list of prospective outs as well. Then lastly, on an incredibly connected board like this, it's very possible that one of our opponents could have flopped 2 pairs or even a set. So this means that even hitting the ace might not be any good either. So if you take all of that into consideration, I'm only going to be excited if I see a 9 or a king of the non-club variety. This means we could have as few as only 6 clean outs. You need to factor all of these things in when you're on a draw and contemplating a call. Since both of our opponents are both so incredibly deep, I think an $80 call here is more than justifiable, so that's what I do. The turn comes, and it's a 5 of diamonds, not improving our hand whatsoever, but not hurting it either. Small blind fires out once more for 225, and again the big blind calls. Nothing much has changed since the flop, except now we're possibly getting an even better price to call, since a $225 bet into 305 is a better deal than an $80 bet into the $60 pot. And with the big blind calling as well, we continue to get great odds, so we make the call. The river comes out, and it couldn't be any prettier. It's a king of diamonds, giving us the uncontested, absolute nuts. Let's go! What's even more amazing is when small blind shoves all in for about 700. We don't even have to put in any work. The big blind folds, of course, missing whatever draw he was on, but we snap call, since, well, we have the nuts. I inform our opponent we have the nuts, and don't bother making him show. We scoop this really nice pot to be up over 1400 for the session. After this hand, I play another 45 minutes without a whole lot happening, before catching out, since I'd already played a long session at Resorts World prior to coming to the Wynn. In for 1700 and out for 3202 for a delectable profit of 1505 after only 2 hours and 11 minutes of playtime. Okay, so check out my graph for this session. You'll notice something very important about my winning strategy. Right up until that giant spike with the ace-queen hand, it was a massive flat line, and then after that hand, it was mostly a flat line as well. So for a 2-hour session, that one hand is pretty much the only considerable hand that I played. A lot of the time, this is how most of my nights go. There are various different ways to be profitable at poker, just like there are various forms of martial arts. Mark Goon from Hungry Horse practices and teaches a very different technique than I do, where you battle for every pot and bluff in every situation you can imagine to increase your hourly win rate. I myself do not utilize nor do I teach this strategy. Instead, I only concern myself with the big pots. I don't try to bluff pots where I'm only invested 20 or 50 bucks or whatever. That's my personal play style though. You are more than welcome to use whatever style fits best with your own personal preferences. However, if you think you have something to learn from my vlogs, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Or maybe you just like my inappropriate sense of humor. If you want to help support the channel, go check out my Patreon. There, you can find several videos from my coaching series. Looking to improve your game with some one-on-one coaching from Aero? Then just hit me up on Instagram or shoot me an email. But for now, I hope to see you in the next video.